I was 83 years old the first time I opened that little brown folder again. It still smelled like ink and dust. You wouldn't think paper could smell like regret, but I swear to God, that folder did. It held the original draft of my will, neatly typed, notarized, official. Something I'd written back in 2005 when my wife Nancy was still alive, and my son David still called me Dad without contempt in his voice. I had left everything to him back then: the house on the hill, the Buick, the small savings from my mechanic's pension, even the old wooden toolbox my grandfather gave me. But life has a way of wearing down your assumptions like water carving a rock. And sometimes, what's left behind isn't legacy, it's silence. It was a Tuesday morning. Quiet, gray, the kind that creeps up on your bones before you even realize it's raining. I was sitting at the kitchen table alone, stirring a spoon in coffee I no longer had the taste for. The house was too quiet. Always was, since Nancy passed. I glanced over at the framed photo on the windowsill. Her in that floral church dress, me in a borrowed suit, and David between us, 7 years old with a missing front tooth and too much joy for one face. That boy disappeared somewhere around his 30s, swallowed up by money, ambition, and a woman who looked at me like I was a leaking faucet waiting to be shut off. Her name was Kelsey, my daughter-in-law, in-law only, and she never liked me. The feeling, I admit, was mutual, but I tolerated her for my son's sake, for the kids, for whatever thread of hope I still held that the boy I raised was still in there. Somewhere, under the designer suits and passive-aggressive silence, that hope, that's what made me pick up the will that morning. The first time I changed it, I was angry. It was the night David screamed at me on the phone for missing his daughter's recital. Said I prioritized my church buddies over my own blood. I hadn't even known about the recital until the next day. He didn't believe me, didn't want to, so I drove down to the county office, pulled out my original will, and crossed out his name with a pen that shook in my hand. Rewrote it, left everything to charity. St. Jude's, the local veterans shelter, the food bank. I told myself it was the right thing. If my own son didn't care about me while I was breathing, why should he get a penny when I'm dust? But a month later, I added his name back in. Why? Because he sent me a photo of my grandkids holding a "We miss you, Grandpa" sign. Maybe it was Kelsey's idea. Maybe it was real. I didn't care. I just wanted to believe. Hope, it's a stubborn, cruel thing. It dresses up like forgiveness and smells like home. It whispers, maybe this time will be different, even when the bruises haven't healed from the last time. You'd think at 83, a man would learn better. But the older I got, the more I realized, some lessons don't come with age. Some come with funerals. When Nancy died, I expected David to show up within the hour. He came 2 days later, wearing sunglasses indoors and smelling like whiskey he thought I wouldn't notice. He hugged me, said sorry, Dad, like it was something he was rehearsed to say. Then he asked if the life insurance had cleared. That was the second time I removed him from the will, not because I hated him. God knows I never could. But because I couldn't stomach the idea of him selling Nancy's teacups on eBay or turning our little home into some modern Airbnb nightmare. I sat alone that night, staring at the fireplace we never lit anymore, and wondered, who would sit in this chair after I'm gone? Would anyone remember the stories? The creak in the floorboard that made Nancy laugh? The scratch marks from our old dog Jake? Or would they rip out the wood, repaint the walls, and say, this old place has good bones? The third time I rewrote my will, I wasn't angry. I was tired. It was after my heart scare. Just a flutter, they said, but enough to put the fear of finality into a man. I didn't want to die unsure, unsettled, so I sat down, and for once, I didn't write David's name. I wrote a letter. It started, "If you're reading this, son, it means I'm finally where your mother's been waiting for me." And I told him the truth, not the sugar-coated version. I told him I loved him, even when he didn't call. Even when he chose others over me. Even when he looked through me like I was just another problem to solve. I told him I never stopped hoping he'd come back, not just physically, but as the boy who used to sit on my lap and ask if angels were real. And I told him, finally, that I forgave him. But I couldn't leave him everything, not because I didn't love him, but because love without respect becomes self-destruction. I haven't signed that last version yet. It's sitting in the drawer, under a pile of newspapers and old glasses that don't fit my face anymore. I keep looking at the blank line for beneficiary, and I wonder, who am I writing this for? Who will truly remember the man I was? And more painfully, who deserves it? The last time David visited me, he didn't even knock, just let himself in with that spare key I always meant to take back but never had the heart to. He stood in the doorway like a stranger, briefcase in one hand, Bluetooth still blinking in his ear. He looked around like the house smelled foreign. Maybe it did. Maybe old wood and loneliness had a scent modern people couldn't tolerate anymore. He said, "Hey, Dad," like he was reading it off a teleprompter. I stood up too quickly and spilled some tea down my sweater. He didn't notice, or pretended not to. He was in town for a real estate conference or something. He didn't say. I only knew because I overheard him talking to someone in the driveway. He sat down on the edge of the couch like it might stain him. Didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask if I was eating well, or if my arthritis still gave me hell in the mornings. Instead, he said, "Listen, about the will." I knew it was coming. I'd seen that look before. Not in his eyes, in his jaw, tensed, like he had to push the word dad out between clenched teeth. He said he was only asking because he was planning ahead, because he had 3 kids now and a mortgage and responsibilities. Responsibilities, as if I'd never carried a mortgage, never worked 16-hour days fixing busted carburetors to keep the lights on. As if I hadn't buried his mother with my bare hands and prayed every night he'd just come home for dinner once in a while. I listened. I nodded. I didn't interrupt. That's what you do when your child starts sounding like a loan officer. He asked if the house was still under my name. Asked if I'd ever thought of moving into assisted living, for your own good, Dad. I laughed, not out loud, just inside. Because I knew what he meant. Assisted living meant clean the place out, sell it, split the money. He left after 20 minutes. Said he had a dinner. Promised he'd call next week. That was 11 months ago. I still sit by the phone sometimes, like a fool. Sometimes, when the wind's just right, I can still hear Nancy humming from the kitchen. That old Glenn Campbell song. The one we danced to the night before David was born. Back when we thought love would be enough to hold it all together. But love isn't glue, it's a flame. And when the wind shifts, it flickers, it dances, and if you're not careful, it disappears. I spent the next day sitting on the porch, watching the mail truck pass me by. No card, no letter, just silence again. I thought about rewriting the will again. Not out of spite this time. Out of clarity. I thought about the young man from church who brings groceries to the old folks every Thursday. Marcus. He's polite. Always says sir. Helped me fix a loose railing last winter. No charge. He once asked about the roses in Nancy's garden. I told him how she used to sing to them when she watered them. He said, "That's beautiful, sir. You don't see love like that anymore." He meant it. I wondered, would it be wrong to leave something to someone who saw me, not just my assets? Is blood the only measure of belonging? That night, I couldn't sleep. Got up around 2 a.m. and sat in front of the fireplace. The folder was on the table. Open, well, half filled. The line for primary beneficiary was still blank. I picked up the pen, just held it, and I cried. Not because I was sad, because I was tired of deciding between loyalty and logic. You raise a child with everything you've got: time, energy, prayers, lectures, scraped knees, midnight visits, football games in the cold. And then you grow old and realize you don't just lose people. Sometimes they walk away while you're still here. Sometimes they forget the father who taught them to ride a bike, tie a tie, say please and thank you. Sometimes they forget you entirely, and all you have left is a pen, a page, and a question too heavy for a dying man. If the people you gave your life to no longer care you exist, who deserves what's left of you? That winter was a brutal one. The snow in Asheville doesn't usually hang around, but that January, it came down hard and stayed. I could hear the roof groan at night like it remembered being young too. Like it had once stood tall and proud, but now just bore weight in silence. My knees wouldn't let me shovel like I used to, so I just cleared a narrow path from the porch to the mailbox, out of habit more than necessity. No one was sending me anything worth opening. I kept the porch light on every evening. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe I told myself David would drop by. Maybe the kids would run up the steps in their little boots, shouting Grandpa, like in the pictures. But no one came, not even for Christmas. They sent a card, the kind you buy in bulk and sign with a scribbled name. No handwritten message, no photos, just a printed love. David, Kelsey, Ethan, Ellie, and Ava. Love? It felt like someone had typed the word and mailed it off to die in my mailbox. I set the card beside Nancy's urn on the mantle, where it sat like a polite line next to her truth. I thought about calling him. I even picked up the phone. Twice. But what do you say to someone who's already decided you're an obligation? Do you beg? Do you pretend nothing's wrong? Do you pretend it's not Christmas Eve and you're eating canned soup alone while listening to old gospel songs just to feel something? I poured a small glass of whiskey instead, sat in Nancy's chair, ran my fingers across the old fabric, torn a little on the armrest where she used to grip when we watched the news. She would have known what to do. Nancy never let bitterness settle. Even when David was a teenager and slammed doors, cursed her under his breath, forgot birthdays, she always said, "He'll come back, Charlie. He's just lost right now." She believed lost things found their way home. But what if home isn't where they want to go anymore? What if they outgrow your kind of love? I stayed up that night, watching the snow fall. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind that makes a man start talking to ghosts just to fill the room. I said it out loud, like an old fool. "Nancy, what do I do with this will?" No answer, of course. But somewhere between the second and third sip, I remembered something. The last birthday I had before she passed, David had come that year, for once. He brought the kids, though he spent most of the afternoon texting in the corner. I didn't mind. The kids filled the house with noise, laughter, peanut butter on the couch. It was perfect. Ellie, the middle one, she climbed into my lap and whispered, "I love you, Grandpa. You smell like trees." I chuckled so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. That little girl had no filter, but she meant it. You can tell when a child loves you with their whole heart, before the world teaches them to withhold it. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. Would she even remember that moment? Would she still think I smelled like trees? Or would she grow up only knowing the version of me her parents painted: old, slow, stubborn, inconvenient? I thought about writing a separate letter, one for each grandchild, telling them stories about their father when he was young, about how he once cried when he caught his first fish because it looked at him with eyes full of trust, about how he used to sing in the truck with me on long drives, completely off key. Maybe they'd find those letters someday. Maybe they'd read them and wonder what else they never knew about the man their dad stopped talking about. Maybe that would be enough of a legacy. Not the house, not the bank account, but the truth, the memory of a man who loved them, even when he was forgotten. I pulled out the will again, left it blank, but I did something else. I wrote a new page, titled it, "If You Ever Wonder Who I Was," and I began, "Dear Ethan, Ellie, and Ava." It wasn't a legal document, but it was more real than anything I'd ever signed, because I wasn't just leaving behind stuff anymore. I was leaving behind pieces of myself, stories, moments, proof that I was here, that I mattered, even if no one knocked on the door that winter, even if love never came back the way I prayed it would. The dining table still sat 6. It had been over a decade since all 6 chairs were filled, but I never removed them. Never gave them away, never downsized. I guess I always hoped one day the sound of feet would return. Laughter, maybe even a slammed door or two, the noise of life. But that evening, on my 84th birthday, I sat alone at the head of the table. Just me, a single slice of lemon cake, and a candle I lit myself. No one called, no one came. The phone stayed as quiet as the rest of the house. I cut the cake slow, small slice, just enough not to choke on the loneliness. I looked around at the empty chairs, one for Nancy, one for David, and 3 for the grandchildren who used to call me Grandpa Tree. I smiled at that, a small, cracked smile. It was all I had left of them, memories and names in my handwriting. The rest had drifted too far out. I poured myself a cup of tea and reached into the drawer beside me. That brown folder again, 3 versions of the will inside. The first one from 2005, untouched. The second, with his name scratched out in angry ink. And the third, the one with the blank line that mocked me every day. I took them out, lined them up on the table like evidence in a trial. Evidence of a father's indecision, of love bruised, not broken, of disappointment layered over loyalty like old paint. They say a man shouldn't die with unfinished business. But what if the business was love? What if love is the mess you leave behind? Because no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't force someone to receive it. I picked up the pen again. This time, I didn't hover over the beneficiary line. I turned the page, back to the letter I was writing to my grandchildren. "Your father was a good boy, once," I wrote. "I don't know what changed. Maybe it was me. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I was too much." I paused. The pen slipped slightly. "I just want you to know, none of this was because I stopped loving him. I never did." I folded that page gently, placed it in a new envelope, wrote each grandchild's name across the front in big letters like I used to do on Christmas gifts. And then, I stood. I walked slowly to the closet, where I kept Nancy's old box of keepsakes. I tucked the letters inside, along with a photo of David at age 5, wearing my work boots that went all the way up to his thighs. He used to call them giant feet. I placed the box gently back on the shelf, and then I walked to the fireplace. I placed the first 2 versions of the will inside, and I lit a match. The flames crackled, soft and hungry. I didn't look away. I wasn't angry. I was free, because suddenly, I realized I didn't have to choose between blood and peace. I didn't have to beg to be remembered. I could let go of the version of David the first was clinging to. Let go of the idea that legacy had to mean a deed or a balance sheet. Let go of the belief that if I didn't leave everything to someone, it all meant nothing. No, I had my stories, my memories, my love still intact. I had that letter, and a house filled with echoes that proved I had lived and loved and tried. And sometimes, that's enough. It was late March when he showed up. Cold wind still ran through the valley like winter hadn't fully given up yet. But the dogwoods had started blooming, white blossoms stretching out like open hands. I was on the porch, coat on, sipping black coffee like I always do around 6 a.m. when I heard the sound of tires on gravel. A black rental car, quiet engine. I assumed it was someone lost, or one of those real estate folks come to ask again if I was ready to downsize. But it wasn't. The door opened slowly. A young man stepped out. Thin, sharp cheekbones, nervous hands. He looked familiar. I squinted, heart jumping in my chest like it hadn't in years. And then he waved. "Grandpa?" It was Ethan, my grandson. I hadn't seen him in nearly 5 years, not since he was a tall, gangly middle schooler with braces and a messy cowlick. Now he was taller, clean-shaven, dressed simply in jeans and a jacket. But the eyes, they were still his mother's, and they were watery. I stood slowly, every joint resisting me, heart thudding hard under my ribs. He walked up the steps, awkward, unsure. I hope it's okay. I found the address in Mom's files. I needed to see you. I opened my arms before I could think. He stepped into them like he belonged there the whole time. That hug was longer than I expected. He held on like something might break if he let go too fast. When we finally sat down on the porch, he looked at me with this mixture of guilt and wonder, like he didn't quite believe I was real. "I didn't know you were still here," he said. "Dad doesn't really talk about you." I nodded. "I figured. He told us you didn't want anything to do with the family." I felt that like a punch, but I didn't flinch. "What made you come now?" I asked. Ethan hesitated, looked down at his hands, then said, "We had this school assignment, a personal family history thing." I started looking through boxes at home. Found old pictures, a letter Mom wrote to you before she passed. "Kelsey died?" I blinked. "When?" "Last year. Breast cancer." "Dad, he's not the same. Worse, actually. He just shut off. We don't talk about her. Or you. It's like she never existed." He paused, then added, "I don't think that's fair." I couldn't speak. He reached into his backpack and pulled something out. A photo. An old one, Nancy, David, and baby Ethan in my arms. "I found this in a box marked trash." He looked at me. I think I was meant to keep it. We sat in silence for a while. Then he asked, "Do you hate Dad?" I exhaled slowly. That question had lived in my spine for years. "No," I said. "I don't hate him. I just grieve him." Ethan nodded like he understood. "I'm sorry we stayed away so long," he said. "I don't want it to be like that anymore." I looked at him closely then. Not a boy, a young man, and in his eyes, I saw a flicker of the legacy I thought had died. Not money, not houses or pensions, but memory, connection, heart. I reached over and patted his hand. "You came. That's all I ever really wanted." He smiled. I was thinking, maybe I could come back more often, maybe help around the yard, maybe just talk. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. It was the first time in years someone wanted me. Not what I had, not what I built, but me. I nodded, and for the first time in decades, the house didn't feel so quiet anymore. The next morning, I rose before the sun. I don't know what woke me. Maybe habit, maybe hope. Or maybe it was that feeling, deep in your gut, when something shifted in your life, and you don't want to waste the quiet before the day starts shouting again. I sat at the kitchen table. Same old worn wood, same coffee mug I've had since '87. But this time, I wasn't alone. Ethan had stayed the night. He asked to sleep on the couch, even though the guest room was made up and ready. Said he wanted to hear the house breathe at night, like his dad once did when he was young. I didn't argue. Just handed him Nancy's old quilt and watched him drift off like a child coming home from a long, lost journey. That morning, he was still asleep, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I opened the drawer, pulled out the brown folder one last time. For the first time in years, my hand didn't tremble when I reached for the pen. I didn't cross out names. I didn't leave lines blank. I just wrote, "To Ethan," not because he had asked for anything, not because he expected it, but because he gave me back something I didn't think I'd feel again: purpose. Not obligation, not guilt, but the pure, simple warmth of being wanted. That changes a man. The new will wasn't long. House, savings, possessions, they were modest. But I gave what I had. More than that, I wrote in my own handwriting a paragraph above the signature. "To Ethan, I leave this not because of blood, but because you saw me, because you asked about the stories no one else wanted to hear. Because when the world forgot me, you remembered." I signed it, dated it, and then I sat there for a while, just watching the ink dry. The morning sun crept in slow through the kitchen window, catching on the glass of Nancy's photo frame. For a moment, it looked like she was smiling. I whispered, "He came back, love. Not the one we expected, but maybe the one we needed." Later, when Ethan woke, I handed him a letter. Not the will, just a letter. He opened it and read quietly. It said, "One day, when I'm gone, you'll find a lot of old things in this house. Most of them won't matter to the world. But if you ever find yourself doubting who you are, remember this. You came to see an old man who had nothing to give you but a memory. And you gave him peace. That's more valuable than gold. Love always. Grandpa Charlie." He wiped his eyes and folded the letter with a reverence I didn't think his generation still knew. "I want to take care of the house, Grandpa," he said. "Not sell it, not flip it, just keep it alive." I nodded. "You already have." That afternoon, we worked together in the garden. He asked about Nancy's roses. I told him how she used to hum to them. He tried humming too, off-key, just like his father. I didn't say it out loud, but in that moment, I didn't feel regret anymore. Not even about David, because love, when real, doesn't disappear. It just finds a different path, a different branch on the same tree. And now, at last, I had someone I could trust to carry the roots forward. The last spring I lived in that house, the cherry tree bloomed like it hadn't in years. Its petals fell soft like snow, and for once, I didn't feel like an old man watching the world move on without him. Because Ethan came every week now, sometimes with books, sometimes with tools, sometimes with nothing but time and a quiet smile. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just sat side by side on the porch, listening to the birds and the wind and the creak of wood that knew our names. He asked me questions no one else had ever thought to ask. About my childhood, about the war, about the way Nancy used to dance barefoot in the kitchen while boiling potatoes. About how I fell in love with the sound of her laughter before I even knew what love was. And I answered them all, because somewhere deep inside, I knew I wasn't just telling him stories. I was handing him the keys to a life almost forgotten. A few weeks before my 85th birthday, I had another scare. The chest pain was sharp this time. Not a flutter, not something to wave off with whiskey and willpower. The air was cold, too bright, nurses with rushed hands and kind eyes. Ethan stayed the whole night beside my bed. Didn't even call his father. Didn't need to. He held my hand like it mattered, like I mattered. And when I came back home, he installed new railings by the porch and brought soup in Tupperware. He didn't say the word inheritance once, didn't ask about the will, but I told him anyway. One night, after dinner, we sat in the living room, just the two of us, the lamp casting a soft circle of light on our faces. I reached over, opened the drawer one last time, and handed him the brown folder. He held it like it was something sacred. "I'm not giving you this because you're my grandson," I said. He looked at me, confused. "I'm giving it to you because you showed up when no one else did. When your father forgot who I was, you remembered." He swallowed hard. "Grandpa, I don't want anything from you." I raised my hand. "But you gave me everything, Ethan. You gave me back my name." We didn't speak after that. Didn't need to. The silence was warm, alive. A few months later, I started forgetting names. Then days. Then how to tie my shoes. It came slow, like dusk creeping across the sky. But Ethan never treated me like I was fading. He brought me books to read, even when I couldn't finish a page. He played the old records Nancy loved, even when I didn't remember her face for a moment. He sat with me, held my hand, told me stories I used to tell him, like looping time backwards, handing memory back to the one who gave it first. And when the time finally came, when the house went still and I went quiet for good, he was there. He buried me next to Nancy, just as I asked. He placed a single rose on my casket and read aloud the last line of my will, to the one who saw me, not as a burden or a name on paper, but as a man worth knowing. I leave this house and all that lived in it. Now the house still stands, just off the corner of Maple and Sunset in Asheville. People drive by and see the porch light on. They don't know the stories inside, but Ethan does, because he kept them alive. Because sometimes, the people we leave behind don't have our blood, but they carry our soul. And that's what legacy really means. The home you build in someone's memory. The way you are remembered. Not with money, but with love. Real, quiet, enduring love. The kind that shows up, even when no one else does. End of story.